Her name is Miranda Wells. She is 31 years old. 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday afternoon in March, she sat in the back of a conference room at Sentinel Cyber Defense, the company where she had worked as an intern turned junior analyst for 2 years. The chief executive officer, a man named Richard Dalton, was conducting the quarterly all-hands meeting. He made a joke. He pointed at her and said, "The quiet analyst in the back probably couldn't secure a home Wi-Fi network." The room laughed. Miranda's fingers went numb. What Richard did not know was that Miranda had spent the last 18 months building something in silence, something he would soon discover had the attention of the Pentagon, something that would make his authority look very small. Before she tells you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if stories about quiet vindication resonate with you. Drop your city and time zone in the comments. She loves knowing where you are listening from. To understand how Miranda ended up working at a cybersecurity firm while barely speaking above a whisper, you have to go back to where she started. Her father was a systems administrator for a mid-sized hospital in Portland, Oregon. He built things that stayed hidden. He never sought credit. He came home most evenings and repaired the small electronics that everyone else had thrown away. Her mother managed the administrative side of a dental practice and believed that quiet competence was a virtue that would eventually be recognized without fanfare. Neither parent was chatty. Miranda grew up in a gray-carpeted house on the east side of Portland with one older sister, Catherine, who operated on different principles entirely. Catherine was a natural performer. She played soccer, ran for student body vice president, made the speech and debate team, and spent her teenage years accumulating accolades in a way that filled the household. Their mother attended every soccer game. Their father drove Catherine to tournament debates 3 hours away. Catherine's achievements were visible, celebrated, and abundant. Miranda, by contrast, excelled at things that generated no applause. She taught herself to code at 13, building small utilities that made her father's job easier. She won a mathematics competition in 9th grade, but it was a regional event with no fanfare. She did not mind. She preferred working where no one was watching. By the time she graduated high school, Catherine had received 4 college scholarship offers and had decided to study business at the University of Washington. Miranda had received a full-ride academic scholarship to Oregon State, which she accepted without telling her parents she had applied. The moment that crystallized the family's emotional hierarchy came during a dinner in the spring of Catherine's junior year. Catherine had been elected president of her business fraternity and was being honored at a banquet. Their mother had driven up to Seattle for the event and returned glowing. She spoke about the banquet for an entire week. Catherine had worn a blue dress. Catherine had given a speech about ethical leadership. Catherine had looked so confident. That same week, Miranda had been invited to present her data structures research at a computer science symposium in San Francisco. She had mentioned it once, in passing, at dinner. Her father asked which Friday she would be driving down. She had to clarify that she was flying and presenting and would be gone for 2 days. He nodded and said that sounded nice. Her mother asked if she was nervous. Miranda said no. That was the extent of the conversation. But there was one person who understood the difference between Catherine's visibility and Miranda's invisibility. That person was her father's sister, Eleanor, who had worked as an independent software engineer in Silicon Valley for 30 years. Eleanor had started her career in the 1990s when there was no diversity language, no mentorship culture, no pipeline initiatives. She had simply been good at her work and had been systematically overlooked because she was a woman who did not self-promote. Eleanor noticed Miranda differently than the rest of the family did. She visited Portland every other year and would find Miranda in the study where she was working on code. They would not talk much. Eleanor would sit beside her niece and ask technical questions. She would listen to Miranda's solutions. She would occasionally say, "That is elegant." Once, when Miranda was 16, Eleanor told her, "The world will always make more noise about people who want to be seen than about people who actually know how to build things. You need to decide now if you are going to resent that or use it." Miranda carried Eleanor's words forward. When she finished her undergraduate degree at Oregon State, she did not pursue graduate school or the high-visibility tech companies where Harvard Business Review would have tracked her trajectory. Instead, she took a job as an intern at Sentinel Cyber Defense, a smaller firm in the Portland metro area that specialized in infrastructure security for defense contractors. She was quiet. She was overlooked. She was exactly where she wanted to be. 18 months into her employment at Sentinel, Miranda had still not been assigned to a project commensurate with her skills. She had interviewed as an intern, and even after being brought on permanently, she remained relegated to the junior analyst track. This was not a dramatic injustice. It was a slow, consistent pattern of dismissal disguised as procedure. The pattern began in her first week of actual employment, 3 months after her internship started. Sentinel had landed a contract to audit the network infrastructure of a regional financial services client. It was prestigious work. It required someone who understood both the theoretical foundations of cryptography and the practical implementation details of enterprise security architecture. Miranda's manager, Derek, a man who had learned cybersecurity from online bootcamp courses, assembled a team. He chose the 3 most outspoken analysts from the mid-level cohort. They were adequate, they were confident, they were male. Miranda was assigned to administrative support. She documented their findings in spreadsheets. She was never listed in the project report. 6 months later, in November, Sentinel received an urgent request from a government agency running infrastructure tests. The agency needed someone to identify vulnerabilities in a legacy authentication system. The work was rushed, high pressure, and required someone who could think in multiple security models simultaneously. Miranda had identified the exact vulnerability they were looking for within 4 hours, using a theoretical approach that Derek did not recognize. Derek presented her work as his own to the agency liaison. When the agency asked specifically who had done the analysis, Derek said he had. The liaison thanked him. Miranda sat in the corner and said nothing. By late January of the year in question, Miranda had been passed over for promotion 3 times. Each time the feedback was consistent. She was very technically strong, but she lacked leadership presence. She did not speak up in meetings. She did not advocate for her own ideas. She did not command respect from peers. The unspoken subtext was that her quietness was a deficiency. Her competence was not enough. Then came the moment that changed everything, though neither she nor anyone else at Sentinel knew it yet. In early February, Miranda was assigned to what Derek considered a dead-end project. A client in the aerospace sector had reported unusual activity in a subsidiary network. It was probably nothing. Probably a configuration error. Probably a waste of time. Derek gave the project to Miranda because no one else wanted it. He did not expect a result. He did not expect her to find anything. Miranda worked on it for 6 weeks, largely unobserved. She built network models. She wrote custom scripts. She pulled forensic data from backup files that dated back 3 years. She identified something that should not have been there. It was sophisticated. It was patient. It had been sitting in the network for almost 2 years. Someone had been watching the subsidiary's defense contract communications in real time. The malware had been designed so perfectly that it registered as normal network traffic to every standard detection tool. Only someone thinking from first principles about what should and should not exist in that system would have seen it. On a Tuesday evening in mid-March, Miranda walked into Derek's office and placed a 40-page technical report on his desk. She said, "The aerospace client has a serious problem. This was not a configuration error. This is industrial espionage." Derek opened the report. He read the first 5 pages. He did not understand most of it. He asked Miranda to walk him through the key points. She did. He asked her to put together a presentation for the client. She agreed. The presentation was scheduled for Thursday. Derek would deliver it. Miranda would attend as backup support. This was the protocol. This was how things worked. Wednesday afternoon, March 13th, 2:47 p.m., the day before the presentation. Richard Dalton, the CEO, called an all-hands meeting. It was announced with 20 minutes' notice. Everyone at Sentinel gathered in the main conference room, a rectangular space with a polished oak table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the parking lot. There were approximately 35 people present. Derek sat in the 3rd row. Miranda sat alone in the back corner, her hands holding a cup of lukewarm coffee. Richard stood at the head of the table. He was a man who had built his authority on confidence rather than technical depth. He had worked in government contracting for 25 years, and he understood client management and resource allocation better than he understood security architecture. But he spoke about security architecture frequently, as though confidence could substitute for expertise. Richard began the meeting by discussing quarterly performance metrics. He talked about project delivery. He talked about client satisfaction. Then he shifted into a discussion about upcoming contract renewals. He said, "We need our team to show more assertiveness, more leadership, more presence. Clients want to work with people who command attention." He paused. He let the observation sit. Then he turned, gestured loosely toward the back of the room where Miranda sat, and said, "Take our quiet analyst in the back here. Very technically solid, I am sure. But seriously, does anyone think the Pentagon is going to trust a classified contract to someone who cannot even speak up in a room?" The laughter came immediately. It was not unkind laughter. It was the reflexive laughter of people who had just been given permission to affirm a social hierarchy that already existed. Derek laughed the hardest. Several others joined in. A few people did not laugh but did not object either. Miranda did not move. Her fingers did not grip the coffee cup any tighter. Her breathing did not change. She sat with the same posture she had maintained throughout the meeting. She listened as Richard continued talking. He moved on to other matters. The meeting lasted another 17 minutes. When it ended, people filed out. Derek walked past her without acknowledgement. The room emptied except for Miranda. She sat for approximately 90 seconds. Then she stood, disposed of the coffee cup in the trash receptacle, and walked back to her desk. She did not cry. She did not call anyone. She did not post about it or text a friend. She sat at her workstation and completed the remaining formatting on the presentation that Derek would deliver the following morning. That night, at 11:43 p.m., she sent an email to the aerospace client's chief information officer. The email was brief. It stated that she had identified the security issue and had prepared detailed documentation. It requested his email address so that she could send him the technical findings directly, independent of the consulting team. She CC'd Derek and Richard on the email. She included the word urgent in the subject line. The CIO responded at 6:15 a.m. the following morning. He wrote, "I need to speak with whoever identified this threat. Not a presentation. I need a technical deep dive. Can your junior analyst who found this join a call with the Pentagon Cybersecurity Directorate at 2 p.m. Eastern?" He copied the email to Richard and Derek. Richard's response came at 6:47 a.m. Derek never responded at all. What Miranda did not tell Richard or Derek was that she had been prepared for this moment for months. Not prepared in the sense of hoping for it, but prepared in the sense that Eleanor had taught her to be. Eleanor had told her years earlier that women in technical fields often have to build their own visibility structure rather than wait for someone else to notice them. Eleanor had recommended that Miranda maintain a second portfolio, not hidden, but separate, documented, verifiable, but independent of institutional attribution. For the past year, Miranda had been maintaining a personal research archive. Every significant analysis she had completed, she had documented in her own name with her own detailed explanations in a private repository. Every vulnerability she had discovered, she had written up in academic style, with proper citations and methodology. Every theoretical innovation she had developed, she had preserved with the date and timestamp of creation. This was not an act of disloyalty to Sentinel. It was an act of self-preservation. She had learned that institutional credit was not guaranteed to those who were quiet. More than this, Miranda had been taking additional certifications. She had obtained her Certified Ethical Hacker credential. She had pursued a CISP qualification. She had written papers on network forensics that she had submitted to cybersecurity journals under her own name. 3 of them had been published. None of this was known to Derek or Richard. None of this was on her Sentinel resume. It existed in a separate professional reality. In the weeks leading up to the aerospace project breakthrough, Eleanor had been mentoring her through email. Eleanor, now in her 60s, had retired from active consulting but maintained relationships throughout the industry. Eleanor had asked Miranda direct questions, Do you trust your current employer to recognize your value? Do you have a documented record of your accomplishments that exists independent of their attribution? Have you established relationships with people outside the company who can vouch for your capabilities? Miranda's answers to the first two questions had been no. She had not trusted Sentinel, and she had not had that portfolio. Eleanor had said, "Then build it now." Quietly, carefully, but build it. So she had. And when the aerospace client's CIO requested a technical call with the analyst who had discovered the threat, Miranda had been ready for it in a way that went far beyond having good notes. She had a professional narrative. She had peer-reviewed publications that demonstrated her thinking. She had credentials that validated her expertise. She had built a structure of proof. The call with the Pentagon was scheduled for 2 p.m. Eastern Time, which meant 11 a.m. Pacific. 47 minutes before the call, Miranda sat at her desk and opened her email. She had not yet received explicit permission from Richard or Derek to take this call. She sent a brief message to Richard, "I will be taking the call with the Pentagon's Cyber Directorate at 11 a.m. I will provide a full debrief afterward." She did not ask permission. She stated fact. Richard did not respond. At 10:52 a.m., Miranda found an empty conference room, closed the door, and set up her laptop with a wired connection to ensure no connection issues. Her heart was not racing. Her palms were not sweating. She had done the preparation. She had done the work. Now she simply had to speak clearly about what she had found. At exactly 11 a.m., she dialed in. There were 7 people on the call. The aerospace client's CIO introduced her as the analyst who discovered the threat. A woman who identified herself as Dr. Samantha Reeves said, "Miranda, can you walk us through your methodology for identifying this malware? Our team has been running detection on that network for 6 months and found nothing." Miranda spent the next 54 minutes explaining in detail her approach. She described the theoretical framework that had made her skeptical of the standard detection methods. She explained the custom forensic tools she had built to trace the malware's communication patterns. She showed the data. She answered technical questions. She did not flinch when challenged. She did not oversimplify. When the call ended, Dr. Reeves said, "Miranda, this is exceptional work. We would like to brief this to the Joint Chiefs Cybersecurity Task Force. We will need your name on the presentation. Are you available for a briefing call tomorrow morning?" Miranda said, "Yes." She ended the call. She sat in the empty conference room for approximately 3 minutes. Then she walked back to her desk, opened a new email to Richard and Derek, and wrote, "The Pentagon Cybersecurity Directorate wants to brief my threat analysis to the Joint Chiefs Task Force. They have requested that I participate in tomorrow morning's briefing. I wanted to inform you." She did not write it to be gracious. She did not write it to ask permission. She wrote it to create an official record that this had happened on her terms, in her name. That night at 2 a.m., sitting alone in her apartment, Miranda allowed herself one moment of doubt. She opened her laptop and looked at job listings. She looked at roles at companies like CrowdStrike and Microsoft. She looked at federal positions for cybersecurity specialists. She looked at opportunities to simply leave Sentinel and never return. She thought about calling her father and telling him what had happened. She did not. Instead, she closed the laptop. She made tea. She sat in the dark and remembered Eleanor's words, "The world will always make more noise about people who want to be seen than about people who actually know how to build things." Miranda had built something. It was built. Now she simply had to let it be seen. The briefing for the Pentagon's Cybersecurity Task Force occurred on a secure video conference at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, Friday, March 15th. 12 military officials, including 2 flag officers and 6 civilians from the Defense Department, were present. They were the people who set policy for cybersecurity operations across the entire Department of Defense. They were the people who authorized budgets and contracts. They were the people who decided which vendors and which security professionals became central to national infrastructure protection. Richard Dalton had decided that morning that he needed to attend the call. Miranda had not invited him. But Derek had informed her that Richard felt he should be present to ensure that the company was properly represented. Richard set up a separate workstation in his office. He watched. The briefing lasted 1 hour and 15 minutes. Miranda presented her methodology. She explained the implications of the threat. She answered questions about attribution and scope. One of the flag officers asked, "How long did it take your team to identify this?" Miranda did not hesitate. "I identified the threat individually. It took me 6 weeks of analysis after initial assignment to the project." There was a pause. Dr. Samantha Reeves, the aerospace client's CIO who had facilitated the call, said, "Miranda built custom forensic tools to do this analysis. This is not a standard vulnerability detection. This is sophisticated threat hunting." Another officer asked Miranda, "What certifications do you hold?" She listed them. Ethical hacker, CISP. She mentioned her published research in cybersecurity journals. "What is your current role?" another official asked. "Junior analyst at Sentinel Cyber Defense," she said. The call ended with appreciation expressed by all parties. The flag officers specifically noted her name. "Dr." Reeves said, "We will be assigning additional work to Sentinel, and we would like to have Miranda as the primary technical liaison." At 9:17 a.m., while Miranda was still in the conference room, her work phone buzzed. An email from Richard. The subject line read, "Regarding this morning's briefing." The email stated, "The Pentagon is impressed with our analysis. I wanted to commend you on your technical work. This is the kind of initiative we need to see more of. Can you come to my office?" Miranda did not go to his office immediately. She took 10 minutes. She gathered her notebook. She made sure she did not have coffee on her shirt. She walked to Richard's office, knocked on the doorframe, and entered. Richard was standing at his window, looking out at the parking lot. He turned when she entered. His face had changed. There was something different in his posture. He said, "Miranda, I owe you an apology." She said, "Okay, my comment yesterday, in the all-hands meeting. It was inappropriate. I made an assumption about your capabilities based on your communication style rather than your actual work. That was unfair." Miranda stood without moving. She did not say it was fine. She did not say it was forgotten. She did not absolve him. She said, "The aerospace project was assigned to me because no one else wanted it. I worked on it without support or recognition. I identified a significant threat. I reported it through the proper channels. The Pentagon has now requested to work with me directly." Richard nodded. "I understand. I need to know," Miranda continued, "whether I have your support to lead future Pentagon-related projects for Sentinel. I need to know whether my name will be included in proposals. I need to know whether I will be considered for promotion to senior analyst. And I need to know whether in the future decisions about my capabilities will be based on my actual work rather than my communication preferences." Richard said yes to all of that. "Yes," Miranda said, "thank you." She turned and left his office. She did not smile. She did not feel victorious. She felt precise. She had stated what she needed. He had agreed. The facts had rearranged themselves to match her competence rather than his assumptions. In her office, she sent an email to Dr. Reeves confirming her availability for future Pentagon projects. She copied Richard on the email, not to be magnanimous, but to establish the official record. She then sent an email to Eleanor with one line, "It worked." Eleanor responded within an hour. It always does. The consequences unfolded quietly over the following weeks and months. Miranda did not initiate any of them. She simply lived her life and allowed the facts to move around her. 3 weeks after the Pentagon briefing, the Department of Defense formally contracted with Sentinel Cyber Defense to conduct vulnerability assessments across 6 regional military installations. The contract was valued at $3 million. Dr. Samantha Reeves specifically requested Miranda as the lead technical analyst on the project. The contract required her to obtain a security clearance which began processing immediately. When the contract was announced internally at Sentinel, Richard held another all-hands meeting. This time he presented it differently. He said, "I want to recognize Miranda Wells. Her work on our aerospace assessment led directly to this opportunity. She will be leading the technical team for this engagement. The rest of you should use this as an example of the quality we need across the organization." Derek sat in the room and said nothing. He had not been assigned to the contract. He understood that his position as Miranda's manager had become an obstacle to her advancement rather than a support structure. By May, 2 other junior analysts approached Miranda privately and asked if she would mentor them on technical documentation and threat hunting methodology. She agreed. She was not required to mentor them. She simply did. She knew what it meant to be overlooked. She did not want to replicate that isolation. In June, Sentinel's board of directors began discussions about opening a dedicated cybersecurity threat research division. Richard recommended Miranda for the division director role, even though she was 31 and would be managing people who had worked at the company longer than she had. The board approved the hire. She was promoted to Director of Threat Intelligence Research in July. Derek's role was restructured. He was transitioned to a project management position with no direct reports. He took a lateral move to a competitor within 8 weeks. Before he left, he did not speak to Miranda. Catherine, Miranda's sister, heard about the promotion from their mother. Catherine called Miranda for the first time in over a year. She asked if it was true. She said she was proud of her. Miranda accepted the call without warmth, but also without rejection. She knew that Catherine had lived in a different family structure than she had, and that Catherine's achievements had been affirmed in ways that Miranda's had not. There was no reason to revisit that inequality. Richard, for his part, changed the way he conducted all-hands meetings. He began asking the quietest people in the room to speak about their projects. He began questioning his own assumptions about what leadership looked like. Whether this was genuine change or strategic opportunism did not matter to Miranda. The behavior had shifted. That was sufficient. The Pentagon continued to assign contracts through Sentinel. Within 18 months, Miranda had become the primary point of contact for the Department of Defense's Cybersecurity Operations Group. She was invited to speak at defense contracting conferences. Her name appeared in industry publications. Intelligence agencies began recruiting her for consulting roles. She did not need to self-promote. The quality of her work had become visible enough that visibility was no longer negotiable. The one relationship that did not shift was with Richard. He was professionally cordial. He gave her the resources she needed. He took her suggestions seriously in board meetings. But they never spoke casually. They never had coffee together. The boundary between them was clear. He had called her invisible, and she had simply become unavailable to him. This seemed fair. 16 months after the inciting incident, Miranda sat at her dining table on a Saturday evening. The table was an older piece of wood that she had purchased from an estate sale and had refinished herself. It was small enough for 4, but she had made food for 6. Eleanor was flying up from California for the weekend. Her father was driving over from his house in northeast Portland. Her colleague, Dr. Samantha Reeves, who had become a close professional ally and informal mentor, was coming from Seattle. And there was a younger analyst from her team at Sentinel, a woman named Priya, who reminded Miranda of herself, who was being welcomed into the circle. Miranda had prepared a simple meal: roasted chicken, new potatoes with rosemary, a salad from the farmer's market, fresh bread from the bakery that had recently opened 2 blocks from her apartment. She had lit candles. She had opened a bottle of wine. The late evening light was coming through her kitchen windows at an angle that turned everything warm. Eleanor arrived first. She was now 64, her hair entirely silver, her face lined in a way that suggested someone who had lived decisively. She embraced Miranda. She said, "Show me this place." Miranda showed her the apartment. It was modest, but intentional. Every piece of furniture had been chosen carefully. Her office contained books on cryptography, network architecture, threat intelligence, and philosophy. Eleanor nodded. She said, "This is a place someone intelligent lives." When everyone was gathered at the table, Eleanor raised a glass. She said, "I want to say something. When Miranda was 16, I told her that the world makes more noise about people who want to be seen than about people who know how to build things. I want to acknowledge that what I said was partially wrong. The world does make more noise. But the people who know how to build things, if they are patient and unafraid, eventually change the world in ways that make noise irrelevant. I want to drink to Miranda, who has quietly built something that matters. To you." They drank. Miranda did not cry. But she felt something shift in her chest. She had spent her life waiting to be noticed by people who had made the choice not to see her. She had built her worth outside that acknowledgement. But this room, her father who had always believed in quiet competence, Eleanor who had lived it, Samantha who recognized it, and Priya who would learn it, this room was seeing her accurately. Priya, who was 24, asked Miranda, "When did you know that you were going to change jobs? When did you decide to find something better?" Miranda answered, "I didn't change jobs. I stayed at Sentinel and changed what Sentinel understood about me. The difference is that staying required them to eventually acknowledge what I was actually doing. If I had left, Richard and Derek might never have understood that they had failed to see me." Her father, who rarely spoke in groups, said, "That took courage. It would have been easier to leave. It was more precise to stay," Miranda said. It showed them the truth about their own misjudgment. They ate and talked for 3 hours. They discussed work and family and the specific loneliness of being good at something that generates no immediate applause. Eleanor told stories about her own career in Silicon Valley, the dismissals she had endured, the ways she had learned to be visible without becoming performative. Samantha spoke about the Pentagon's struggle to recognize quality work that arrived quietly. Priya listened and took it all in. When the evening ended, Eleanor held Miranda's hand. She said, "I am proud of you. Not because you won, but because you did not need to win. You did the work. You let the work speak. That is the hardest thing." Miranda understood then what victory looked like. It was not conquest or vindication. It was simply being seen by people who mattered, for work that was real. If you are watching this and you recognize yourself in this story, if you have ever been dismissed because you were quiet, or overlooked because you did not self-promote, or mocked because you did not command a room, then this message is for you. The first thing you need to understand is that the people who made you feel small did not do so because you were actually small. They did so because they were threatened by competence that did not ask for validation. Your quietness was not a deficiency. It was a threat to people who had built their authority on noise rather than substance. The second thing you need to know is that you do not need them to recognize you. Miranda spent 2 years working at Sentinel without Richard Dalton's acknowledgement. She did not work toward his approval. She worked toward precision. She built a portfolio that existed independent of his awareness. She cultivated relationships with people outside the company who could see her accurately. She developed credentials that proved her capability to anyone who was genuinely interested. So here is what you are allowed to do. You are allowed to stop waiting for permission from people who have shown you that they will not give it. You are allowed to build your work independent of institutional credit. You are allowed to cultivate alliances with people who see you clearly, mentors, peers, colleagues who understand that good work matters more than good performance. You are allowed to invest in your own credentials, your own documentation, your own proof of capability. You are also allowed to stay. You do not have to leave to be validated. But if you stay, stay for the right reasons. Stay because the work matters to you. Stay because you can change the place by quietly becoming indispensable. Stay because letting someone eventually understand their own failure to see you is a form of precision that matters. The third thing is this: family is not always blood, and it is not always the people who should have seen you first. The people who matter are the ones who recognize quality in silence. Eleanor saw Miranda. Samantha saw Miranda. The Pentagon saw Miranda. Those relationships became the structure of Miranda's professional life and her sense of belonging. You don't need loud vindication. You need quiet clarity about who you are and what you can do. You need relationships with people intelligent enough to see it. And you need the patience to let your work rearrange the world around you rather than the desperate need to rearrange yourself to fit someone else's limited vision. Please share this story if it spoke to you. Comment and tell me, have you ever had to help someone see your own capability? I would love to know your story. Thank you for listening.